Hi, I'm Dr. Lynn Wagner, and you are listening to Doc's Thoughts. Today's episode is about deliberate cold exposure therapy. So, I'm going to talk about what it is, how to do it, the science behind it, and why you should absolutely start trying it. So, if you're like me, you've probably seen all of the influencers on social media talking about cold plunging, posting the pictures of themselves in the pool, talking about the health benefits. So, I got really curious about it and I did a deep dive on the science behind it. And I was convinced that it was probably something I wanted to start doing in my life. And so, when we moved our facility, to our current facility at Wagner Integrative Health, we were able to build a room that has a traditional hot sauna, so it gets really hot, and then a plunge pool that we purchased, a commercial plunge pool that I can use, my staff can use, and it's also open to community members if they want to start experiencing the cold exposure protocol as well. And since I've been doing that, I've been describing myself as a greased cookie sheet. So I'm someone that could tend to get riled up in the past. If I got caught off in traffic or if I was driving and I was late, I'd have road rage, or, something at work happened or a patient was not satisfied with something, that would kind of rile me up and I'd have that subsequent release of hormones and neurotransmitters that doesn't feel very good. And I've noticed since doing cold exposure that that response is much, much less. So things that normally would have riled me up just kind of slide right off of me like a greased cookie sheet. And it's been pretty consistent for months. So I'm really, really happy with the results. And I've been telling my patients to do the same thing. My family's been doing it, and I want to share more of the information with you. So, why is it beneficial? Let's talk about that first. So, it has to do with your nervous system and your endocrine system and the neurotransmitters and hormones that are released from those systems when you get exposed to the cold. It builds resiliency, it builds adaptability, and it makes you a stronger, more powerful human being, which who does not want to be like that? If you think about it, humans now are pretty weak. And I don't mean this in a condescending way. I fall into that category. So we used to be farmers, hunters, gatherers. We used to move. We used to be exposed to the extremes of temperature. And in our very comfortable world where we have heated seats and heated steering wheels and we have climate controlled environments and we don't have to walk anywhere, we can sit at our desk all day and do our desk job. Our bodies are literally becoming weak. Our bodies crave stress. We crave variability. And when we don't get that, it can actually lead to a reduction in the strength and vitality of your body. And I would say even your mind and your spirit. So while I don't want to give up these creature comforts, I love my heated seats in my car, especially in Wisconsin. We have to actually expose ourselves to some stressors in life intentionally, which is what cold exposure can do, so that we maintain that strength and resiliency. Otherwise, we're going to lose it. And that's when you can end up with chronic disease and illness, depression, weakness, and just a general feeling of not feeling good, which no one wants to feel that way. It's no different than thinking about how a diamond is made or how a powerful athlete is made. The diamond is exposed to heat and pressure and then it becomes a diamond. An athlete is exposed to training and resistance and they become this beautiful pro athlete. We are no different, obviously not to that extreme, but we need a little bit of pressure and stress in order to become that next level of a human being. So let's talk about the science behind it. So like I said, it has to do with the nervous system and the endocrine system, and it's the hormones and neurotransmitters that are involved. So specifically, there is cortisol, there's endorphins, there's dopamine, there's epinephrine and norepinephrine. You could also call those noradrenaline or adrenaline if you've heard it used that way. Those are interchangeable. So epinephrine, norepinephrine, adrenaline, noradrenaline. I might go back and forth throughout the episode. So it's like a yin and a yang. You have this activation and fear that happens when you first get exposed to cold. And then you have this calming, happy result that lasts longer. And the ultimate result is pure goodness. I got to tell you that. So, in terms of the epinephrine and norepinephrine, those are both neurotransmitters and hormones. And those are what get released when you first get exposed to the cold. It's called that fight or flight response. So, the very first time you do cold exposure therapy, you're going to have a huge surge in that. And it might feel very stressful. You might have your heart rate go up. You might have your blood pressure go up. Over time with habituation, what happens is that response gets less and less. So you still get the goodness of having the mental focus and clarity that comes along with adrenaline and noradrenaline, but you lose that crazy stress response that ultimately over time isn't good for your body if you're doing it all the time. And also doesn't feel very good. No one likes to feel like super stressed out, obviously. Then there's the endorphin. So if you've ever run a race or if you're a runner, you know what a runner's high is. It's that feeling of elation and joy after you complete a race that no one can copy. And when you are exposed to cold, you're going to get that same release of endorphins through just that deliberate cold exposure. So that's obviously amazing. Endorphins are natural painkillers and they're mood elevators. And like I said, if you've ever had a runner's high, you know what I'm talking about. Then there's cortisol. So cortisol is kind of a yin and a yang thing as well. We don't want too much cortisol. We don't want too little cortisol. We want it to work the right way it's supposed to, which is in a kind of like a circadian rhythm. It's high in the morning and it goes down when you go to bed at night. So again, when you first get exposed to cold exposure for the first time, you might have a pretty big jump in your cortisol. That's neither good nor bad. But over time, what happens is it actually modulates. So modulation means it adjusts and it changes, meaning it makes your cortisol better able to do what it's supposed to do in the face of stressors in your life in a very healthy way. So it's going to help regulate it and make it more adaptable so that you get that beneficial benefit. And then there's dopamine. So we've all heard about dopamine. Dopamine is part of our pleasure, motivation, reward. It's involved in addictions. So dopamine makes you crave things. And what happens when you get exposed to cold is you do get a release of dopamine and you get alertness, enthusiasm. You also get that desire to do it more. So what I've experienced personally, and this is definitely backed by science, is over time, the more that I did cold exposure, the more I actually started to crave it. Where the day before I know I'm going to do my session, I'm absolutely looking forward to it. And the night before, I'm like, I cannot wait to get there and do the session. So that's a really cool part of it. Plus, you get the added benefit of that alertness, enthusiasm, and happiness that you get from dopamine anyway. So let's talk about what actually happens to your body when you actually get into the cold. So I talked about the neurotransmitters and the hormones, and we'll cover this again. When you get in, you get the activation of adrenaline, noradrenaline, or epinephrine, norepinephrine, whatever you want to call it. And then you get an increase in your cortisol. It's called the fight or flight response or the stress response. Subsequently, you get that balancing of your cortisol and you get the endorphins and the dopamine and you get the pure goodness after that. And again, I can attest to it over and over and over again. So what you'll see overall is just when you're done with your cold exposure initially for that day, you're going to be more alert, you're going to be more focused, you're going to be happier most likely, get more done, be nicer to people around you. And then those benefits kind of trickle out and last in between your plunge sessions until overall, like your overall level as a human being just is constantly uplifted a notch to what it was before you started doing the cold plunge. It's absolutely amazing. So specifically with your mind and your body, what does it do for you? So we talked about mood a little bit. So even if you're not someone who has depression, cold plunging can give you that happiness, contentment, motivation, joy. Again, I said it's addictive and you can have more mental focus. What I love about it is if you are someone who is predisposed to depression or lower mood, specifically in Wisconsin where we have seasonal affective disorder, cold exposure potentially can raise that level of happiness up consistently so you don't suffer as much through those periods of time. So I think it's really, really powerful for those with mental illness, even anxiety. Then you have the inflammation. So we've all seen athletes who do cold plunges after they do heavy lifting or they do races or football games. And there's science behind that. So when someone is put into cold, they're going to get a redirection of their blood from their limbs to their core, and that's to keep you warm. And with that, you're going to have reduced inflammation in those muscles in the limb. And that's due to the reduction in blood flow and reduction in metabolic activity in those muscles. So then what results is less swelling, less pain, less inflammation, like I said, and it's going to help you heal faster from injury or just from regular muscle use that you get sore from. So inflammation definitely goes down. Then you have analgesic properties of cold exposure. Analgesic properties means pain reduction. That's another way of saying pain reduction. And when you get exposed to the cold, like I said, you release the endorphins, and endorphins are known as natural painkillers. So if you're someone who has an injury, cold exposure is beneficial. If you're someone who has chronic aches and pains, cold exposure is beneficial. If you're someone who has fibromyalgia or a specific back pain or something like that, cold exposure can potentially reduce that pain through those through the release of those endorphins that I was talking about. Then there's the immune system. So we obviously all want a healthy, strong immune system. We don't want it to be too strong, but we want it to be strong enough to fight off all of the things that we're exposed to every day. With cold exposure, you're going to see a change in the cells of your immune system. So you're going to see an improvement in your white blood cells, and you're going to see an improvement in how your immune system cells function. So you are going to see a reduction potentially in infections such as cold and flu, and other infections that you can get. So that's definitely been scientifically proven. And I've, again, seen that myself. I've had one cold in the last 6 months. Unfortunately, I just got one. But before that, I had been not sick for a long time, and I'm exposed to sick people all of the time. So definitely an improvement in my immune system. And then one cool thing about cold exposure is that it can actually help with weight loss or maintaining a healthy body weight. So when we're born, we have this type of fat called brown fat. And it's not a bad kind of fat. It's actually very metabolically active, which means it burns calories, it generates heat. And as we get older, we lose brown fat as we get older. And obviously, a lot of us gain white fat, which is the unhealthy fat that none of us really want too much of, but unfortunately, a lot of us have a lot of. With cold exposure, it actually activates the production of brown fat in your body. And you specifically have to do it for enough time each week to get this. Like I said, this isn't something you're going to get just by doing a polar plunge once a year, but you're going to get an improvement in the amount of brown fat in your body. And that brown fat will, even when you're not cold plunging, be burning more calories, generating heat, and overall keeping you more healthy. So it can be very beneficial for someone who's trying to lose weight. If someone has insulin resistance or diabetes, it can help with insulin resistance. Or if you're someone who just wants to maintain a really strong, lean body and be good at whatever athletic endeavors you're doing, it is very, very beneficial for that. There's some studies that show that cold exposure can be good for beauty. I would say there's less inflammation, there's less swelling, you're going to have skin tightening. So there could be temporary improvement in physical appearance. That's obviously not the only reason you want to do it, but there is some potential for that as well. And then a few more things. So there's increase in heart rate variability. So if you haven't heard of heart rate variability, that is what a lot of these health trackers watch to see how healthy you are. So the more you have heart rate variability, the better your parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system are working together. And people feel really good when those two systems work together well, and you're going to see an improvement in heart rate variability. So with deliberate cold exposure, they've been able to document that people's heart rate variability improves after consistent practice, which just means that your nervous system is going to be working better. It's probably the reason why I'm less reactive. There's just more balance between my fight or flight and my rest and digest part of my nervous system. So super powerful. Some people report better sleep after doing cold exposure. That probably has to do with the endorphins and the less pain, less inflammation, the modulation of the cortisol response, and then ultimately it can affect how you sleep at night. There are some studies that say it's better to do cold exposure in the morning, but there are plenty of people who do cold exposure in the evening and still find that benefit of their sleep at nighttime. And then there's that focus and energy, and that kind of ties with the mental health and the mood. But with those neurotransmitters and hormones that are released, specifically the cortisol, noradrenaline, adrenaline, dopamine, endorphins, all of them mixed together, you're going to be able to focus better. You're going to have more energy and be able to get the things done that you need to get done throughout your day. And then you have to think of these things as well. So these are all separate areas of improvement, but really when you combine them all together, it's like a big pile of amazing benefits that compound and synergize with each other. If you think about an athlete, right? They're going to have less inflammation, an improved immune system, less pain, more focus and motivation, better sleep, better body composition. And all of those things combined together are synergistic to give them their desired result of being an amazing athlete. Think about an executive or a high functioning individual. Similarly, they're going to have mental focus, better mood, better sleep, improved stress and resiliency, and they're going to be better at doing their job than they would be if they hadn't been doing cold exposure. So it's truly amazing. I want to talk a little bit about habituation and adaptability. So like I said before, doing cold exposure is something you need to do consistently. And I'm not talking about every day. I'm literally talking about, 2 to 3 times a week. And those things over time make you more adaptive. So you're stressing yourself, you're resting. You're stressing yourself, you're resting. And it strengthens all of those hormones and neurotransmitters and systems in your body that need to respond to those stressors so that they can do so in a very, very healthy way that won't disturb your body and make you feel bad. And so it takes time, and it's learning to keep calm in the face of stress. It's building resilience, grit. It's improving your ability to move through challenges, and it shifts your body into a state where you just cope with daily stress much better than you would have before. So that's all about the science and the background about cold exposure and why I think it's amazing. Let's talk about how you can actually do it. So there's several different ways you can do it. You can be like, I like to think of things in levels. So first thing you can do is just get outside, especially if you live in a cold climate. So many of us go from our cars to our homes, to our beds, to our work, repeat with very little outside exposure. So the more you can get exposed to the elements, even the heat, and this is an episode on heat, but that can be beneficial as well. You're going to be triggering those same responses in your body at a lower level, but it's still really, really good for you. So just get outside. Then there's just doing a cold shower. So if my patients don't have access to a plunge and they don't live close enough to Wagner Integrative Health to come use ours, I tell them just turn your shower all the way cold at the end, stand there for up to a minute, work your way up to a minute, and you're going to get some of those same health benefits. Again, not to the extreme of doing complete submersion, but you're going to get some really good, amazing health benefits just by doing a cold shower every day. Then there's the cold plunge. The reason the cold plunge is so powerful is because it's all about surface area. So you're submersing yourself in the water. So all of your body is getting exposed to this cold, which is going to just result in a more enhanced response overall. So it's all about surface area. And then lastly, there's cold water swimming. So cold water swimming is crazy. I can admit that we have started cold water swimming this winter and it's super fun. I'm not telling you to do it. And you'd want to obviously make sure you're a good swimmer and make sure you're healthy and make sure you're with a friend. That's a whole nother topic, but you could do cold water swimming. The benefits of that is obviously you're usually doing it with a friend. So it's community, you're outside. So you get exposed to nature. And again, it's getting exposed to those elements that are always healthy for you. So how do you specifically do it then once you choose which way to do it? So if it's a shower, just do a minute. If it's getting outside, just get outside. But if you actually have a plunge, if you're going to come visit us at Wagner Integrative Health, what I recommend to people is that they start gradually and they let themselves acclimate and then they gradually build to their desired amount of exposure time. The science shows that anything over 11 minutes a week of deliberate cold exposure is going to give you those health benefits that I talked about. So personally, what I do is I come here twice a week. I do 15 minutes of the sauna. It's at between 180 and 190. And then I do 5 minutes of the cold plunge and take a break, sauna a little bit more. And then I do another minute to 2 minutes after that. And I do that twice a week. So I'm getting over that threshold of time. And I have been able to see the health benefits personally just by that short amount of time. So as you can see, it could literally take you a half hour twice a week if you have access to a plunge to get the health benefits that I'm talking about. And then when you first get in the first time, it'll be the hardest time you'll ever have to do it. So, and usually what happens is people get into the cold and that fight or flight response kicks in. They start to hyperventilate, their heart rate goes up, their blood pressure might go up a little bit. And that's when you have to be very intentional about being mindful, slowing down your breathing, maybe practice some box breathing or just deep diaphragmatic breaths and calming yourself down. And then as you do it more, that initial stress response will be reduced because your body will have acclimated to this. It'll be used to it and it will know what to do. But you have to train yourself first the very first time you do it. And I promise you it's not that bad. And then it's just get okay with being uncomfortable. It's challenging yourself. It's saying, I'm going to do this thing. I know it's going to be good for me. I know it might be painful the first time I do it. And just knowing and trusting that with subsequent practice, it's going to get better and better to the point where like you'll be like me and slightly addicted to it. And then, like I said, do it about 10 to 15 minutes a week if you're actually doing a plunge. And then last thing to talk about, which is important as a physician, is who shouldn't do it. So if you're someone who's chronically ill, if you're someone who has a heart condition or problems with your circulation, you always want to check with your doctor before doing something like this because it is a stress to the body. So you have to make sure your body can handle that surge in hormones and neurotransmitters, especially the first time you do it, so that you don't have an adverse outcome. So definitely talk to your doctor, or if you're one of our patients, talk to us. I can tell you that the majority of people we take care of are totally fine to cold plunge. So there's very few people who should not cold plunge, but if you have any concerns about it, you should talk to your doctor first. And then again, whether you're going to get outside, get in the cold shower, or do a cold plunge, any of those things are beneficial and are going to give you some health benefit. And I really think you should try it. And most important, I would love for you to share with me your experience and photos and tag me on social media because I think this community is growing and it's fun and I want to see how you do it. Thanks for listening as always, and I will talk to you again soon.